They were just teenagers, bright-eyed, restless, on the cusp of something bigger. 27 seniors from Forest Grove High, headed into the woods for one final escape before adulthood swallowed them whole. It was supposed to be a celebration. A farewell. Instead, it became a ghost story. For over 2 decades, the disappearance of the class of '99 was whispered through Oregon towns like a curse. No calls. No bodies. No clues. Just silence. That is, until June 3, 2021. Deep in Oregon's Rogue River, Siskiyou National Forest, a seasoned hiker veered off trail. Through the thicket, something caught his eye, a flash of faded yellow, half consumed by the forest. He pushed through the undergrowth and found it, a school bus. Weather-beaten, decayed, and blanketed in moss. The numbers on its side were nearly erased. Its windows shattered. Its doors rusted shut. Inside, the air was heavy with rot and time. Dust-covered backpacks still rested on seats. Old Polaroids were stuck to the floorboards. A cassette player lay warped on the aisle. Torn pages from a moldy yearbook clung together. But it was what sat in the very last row that froze him in place, a pile of crumpled clothing, and beneath it, a human jawbone. When authorities arrived, the match was immediate, the long-lost bus from Forest Grove High. The one that vanished without a trace on June 5, 1999. But what they found inside raised more questions than answers. The bus wasn't on any records. No rental logs. No fuel receipts. No signs of how it ended up so deep in a forest with no roads nearby. Trail cameras had seen nothing. Yet inside were belongings from nearly every missing student. Some strewn about. Others eerily arranged, as if part of some message or ritual. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was something else. Something deliberately hidden. Sparkle's flashback, 1999. Forest Grove High was alive with energy. The final days of May carried a spark only seniors know, equal parts excitement and dread. Graduation loomed, and with it, freedom. Teachers counted the days. Locker doors slammed with the weight of anticipation. And in the heart of it all were 26 teens bonded by years of shared moments. Lacey Monroe, the Golden Girl. Valedictorian, student council president, and daughter of Mayor Thomas Monroe. She moved through the halls with purpose, a perfectionist under pressure. Behind her bright smile were sleepless nights and quiet panic attacks. Her future at Ivy League schools was certain, but her peace of mind? Less so. Then there was Jared Fields, the prankster with a lens. Always filming, always joking, but watching everything with more intensity than he let on. For him, the graduation trip would be more than a send-off, it would be his final documentary. My Blair Witch, but with laughs, he'd say. Tyrese Hall, the school's star athlete, had already committed to Oregon State. On the surface, he was confident, even cocky. But inside, he worried, what if high school had been his peak? What if the scholarship came with expectations he couldn't meet? And Emily Tran, quiet, observant, often overlooked. Her sketchbook was always in her lap, filled with strange, detailed drawings of woods, shadows, and faces half lost in fog. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words stayed with you. The group never really included her, but they always listened when she spoke. Then came the trip. June 5, 1999. A yellow school bus rolled out of town, driven by Harold Griggs, a substitute driver filling in last minute. The usual driver had called out sick. Parents waved goodbye. Camcorders recorded grainy farewells. Students smiled and posed for one last group photo. It was the last anyone ever saw of them. That night, one mother, Elsie McClure, got a voicemail from her daughter Rachel. The call came at 6:41 p.m. It was muffled, laughter, then someone shouting, "Turn that off," followed by static. No goodbye. No click. Just white noise. When the bus failed to arrive at the campground, no one panicked, at first. Roads were narrow, fog was thick, and delays were normal. But by morning, concern turned to fear. Calls went unanswered. Search teams were dispatched. Helicopters flew overhead. Dogs combed the woods. Nothing. No tracks. No phone signals. No bus. Campground records showed no check-in. It was as if they'd driven off the map. 3 days later, the perimeter widened. A week passed. Then came a clue, a disposable camera found near a riverbank, 15 miles from the main road. It had been cracked open, the film missing. Deliberate. Chilling. 10 days after that, a letter arrived. No return address. Just 5 shaky words scrawled on paper. We made it. Please stop looking. It was signed in what looked like Trevor Callahan's handwriting. But experts disagreed. It was close, but not quite right. Traced, maybe. Imitated. Rumors exploded. Had the students faked their disappearance? Had they joined a cult? Had something older, something in the woods, claimed them? No one could say. No one ever came forward. No remains were found. Until that bus. 2 months later, the case was closed. Quietly. Discreetly. The official record labeled it an unsolved missing persons incident. No suspects. No leads. Just 27 names, gone. But the parents never stopped searching. Some returned to the woods year after year, retracing paths that led nowhere. Others filled missing posters with fading photographs and clung to them like prayer cards. And one father, Robert Vasquez, became an archivist of despair. He kept a journal. Every theory. Every dead-end tip. Every night he couldn't sleep. I don't think they crashed, he wrote once. I don't think they got lost. I think something took them. Something that didn't want them found. He never said what. And no one ever proved him wrong. School back in Forest Grove. The world moved on. The school did too. Forest Grove High echoed with new laughter, new faces, new lives. But a shadow never quite left the halls. Near the front entrance hung a bronze plaque etched with 27 names beneath the words. Gone, but never forgotten. Class of 1999. Every June, the school held a memorial. Teachers lit 27 candles. Some of them had retired early, unable to carry the burden of silence. Others stayed, haunted by the empty chairs they once looked out on. The missing weren't just students, they were still theirs. Bed meanwhile, across town. Time moved differently. Slower. Stuck. Bedrooms were preserved like museum exhibits. Textbooks collecting dust. Posters still pinned to the walls. Journals half-written, untouched. Beds made neatly, as if their owners had just stepped out for lunch. Some parents kept hope alive like oxygen, because without it, what was left? Others sank deeper into the kind of grief that doesn't wail, it just waits. Mr. Delaney, whose son Matthew was valedictorian, spent his days at the library, quietly rereading his son's final essay, page by page, word by word, like scripture. Mrs. Santos still watered the garden her daughter Nina planted just before the trip. She never plucked a flower. Never let one wilt. The garden lived, even if Nina didn't come back to it. But no one held on tighter than Irene Monroe. While others buried hope with the years, Irene sharpened hers into something else, resolve. She never signed a death certificate. Never packed away Lacey's belongings. Lacey's voicemail still answered her phone. Her bed was made fresh every morning. Her toothbrush stayed in its holder. She's not gone, Irene would say. I don't know where she is. But she's out there. I feel it. Neighbors called it denial. Her family called it grief. She just called it love. Evergreen Tree, June 3, 2021, Rogue River, Siskiyou National Forest. Nearly 22 years to the day. Noon. Travis Milner, a firefighter from Medford, decides to hike an old, unmarked trail deep within the forest. No destination. Just quiet. Just trees. Hours pass. The trail disappears. But something in the underbrush glints yellow. Sunlight bouncing off metal. Travis pushes through vines and ferns, and there it is. A bus. Or what's left of one. Rust clings to its frame. Tires sunk into the earth. Windows cracked, vines crawling through every opening. Nature had nearly swallowed it whole. But the number on its side was still barely visible. 57. The door won't open. He forces it. Stale air rushes out, thick with mold and dust. Inside, is a tomb. Seats ripped and collapsed. Letterman jackets decaying. Backpacks rotted. 2 mold-covered graduation caps. Still perched on seat backs. A jacket with the Forest Grove High crest hangs limp over a window rail. And then, near the back, beneath broken luggage racks and collapsed debris, he sees it. Bones. Not one set. Multiple. Some full skeletons. Some partial. 17 bodies later confirmed. Travis stumbles out, shaking. Dials 911. Within hours, the forest swarms with police, forensic analysts, anthropologists. The case, ice cold for 2 decades, has suddenly ignited. News vans arrive. So do the parents. Some with grief. Some with fragile hope. All with questions. Card index dividers inside the bus. Investigators begin cataloging the contents. Most items are destroyed by time. But under the driver's seat, shoved into a cracked, moldy backpack, they find something unexpected. A manila folder. Water-stained, but intact. Inside, charcoal and pencil sketches. Signed in the bottom corner, Emily T. Emily Thompson. One of the missing. One of the unaccounted. Her body is not among the remains. The drawings are detailed. Dark. Disturbing. One image shows a circle of figures in a forest clearing, surrounding a fire. No faces. Just silhouettes. Watching. Waiting. The folder held more than just sketches. It held something else, a warning. One page showed masked figures, faces hidden behind crude, expressionless masks. Another sketch, frantic and heavy with black charcoal strokes, showed blood dripping from trees, pooling into a circle on the forest floor. Symbols surrounded the scene. Not letters. Not words. Not from any known language. Some drawings looked like they were ripped from a personal journal, edges frayed, stained. Personal. The final sketch was the most disturbing. It looked like the school bus, but not the one they found. This one was different. Twisted. Wrong. It sat surrounded by towering, faceless silhouettes. And in the front window, behind the wheel, a mask stared out. DNA identification begins. The forensics team worked fast. Dental records. DNA. Clothing fragments. Of the 28 people who disappeared in 1999, 26 students and 2 teachers, 17 bodies were identified inside the bus. But that left 9 students still unaccounted for. And both teachers. Mr. Carl Muse, AP History. Miss Janine Crawford, chaperone. The idea that the group had simply run away or died in an accident, evaporated. The bus hadn't crashed. It had been hidden. No road could have led it that deep into the forest without leaving a trace. No drag marks. No tracks. No sign of entry or exit. Which begged the question. How did it get there? And more importantly, why only 17? Where were the rest? Evergreen tree darkness in the trees. Investigators expanded the search to a half-mile radius. But the Rogue River Siskiyou terrain was thick, every foot of progress slowed by dense undergrowth. They found no more remains. No signs of life. Only silence, and the oppressive weight of something they couldn't explain. What disturbed them most wasn't the decay or the death. It was the intentionality. This hadn't been an accident. It had been a message. Or a ritual. Or both. The case was reopened, not as a missing persons file, but as a crime scene. Foul play was suspected. Then the drawings leaked to the media. And the public began to speculate. A new theory took shape. One darker than anyone had dared to say out loud. What really happened to the class of '99 in those woods? And who, or what, didn't want them to return? Police car light June 10, Bend, Oregon Police Station. The mystery had gone national. News vans crowded the station. Phone lines rang non-stop. Theories flooded forums, podcasts, newspapers. But no one expected what happened next. Early that morning, as officers went about their usual shift, the front doors swung open. And a man stepped inside. He was gaunt, skeletal. Hair long and matted. Eyes sunken and wild. His clothes hung in tatters. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm Jared Fields. From the class of 1999. The room froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Jared Fields had been one of the missing seniors. No body had ever been found. No sightings. No leads. Now, 22 years later, he stood in front of them. Man standing face to face with the past. Sergeant Emily Wells stepped forward. Mr. Fields, can we see some identification? Jared didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the windows. The doors. The corners of the ceiling. He was scanning. Watching. Or maybe, being watched. I wasn't supposed to come back, he said, voice trembling. They're still watching. A chill ran down Sergeant Wells' spine. Who's watching you? She asked, careful, calm. I don't know, he whispered. I don't know. None of us were supposed to come back. He didn't sound like someone who had survived a tragedy. He sounded like someone who had escaped something. Something unnatural. Receipt the confirmation. Sergeant Wells pressed him gently. Where have you been, Jared? What happened to your friends? Jared flinched. His eyes darted to the exit. I can't. Not yet. Not until I. He stopped. Choked on the words like they were poison. Then a forensic officer entered with a report in hand. He handed it to Sergeant Wells. She scanned it quickly. Her brow furrowed. Jared Fields. Your fingerprints are a match. Your DNA, it matches. For the first time since he entered the station, Jared looked up. His eyes were wide. Not with relief. Not even with fear. But with resignation. Like a man who knew. Coming back might have doomed him. I told you, Jared whispered. I was never supposed to come back. He stood trembling in the police station, his voice ragged with panic. I shouldn't have come back. The room had fallen into stunned silence. They had hoped he would be the key, the one to unlock the mystery. But Jared Fields wasn't a key. He was another locked door. Door on the edge of truth. Mr. Fields, Sergeant Wells said gently, what do you mean you shouldn't have come back? Where have you been? What happened out there? Jared took a step back, shaking his head. I can't. Not yet. They're still out there. Watching. A cold stillness blanketed the room. Jared's voice had the tone of someone living with a truth too terrible to speak. Then, without warning, he turned toward the exit. I can't stay here, he muttered. They'll find me if I stay. Mr. Fields, wait. Sergeant Wells called out, rushing forward. But the door slammed shut behind him. He was gone. And with him, the fragile thread of answers slipped through their fingers once again. Brain days later, the interview. Jared sat across from the investigators. He hadn't slept. Had barely eaten. But now, his eyes were locked open, filled with something deeper than fear, memory. The air in the room was thick. They had gone through the basics. The timeline. The names. Now, he was ready. They were all dead, you know, he said quietly. The ones who didn't obey. The ones who resisted. He looked down, wringing his hands. They just vanished. Like they were erased. Oncoming bus. The breakdown. It started the day the bus broke down, Jared began. We were deep in the forest. Miles from any road. No signal. No help. The engine just died. So, we waited. And waited. Then came the figures. They found us. They wore robes. Gray. Dirty. Like they lived in the earth. They called themselves the Chosen. They said they came from a sanctuary, off-grid. They promised peace. Said the world outside was collapsing. We thought it was crazy. But we were stranded. And scared. So they followed. Fogged the sanctuary. At first, the place seemed calm. Too calm. They were fed. Sheltered. Given a place to rest. It was quiet. Too quiet. The air felt heavy, like time didn't move the same there. But then things changed. They told us to forget who we were. Forget where we came from. They called it cleansing. They weren't allowed to talk about the past. They were told they were being reconditioned. Prepared for a new world. Fork and knife with plate. The food, the sleep, the fear. The food tasted off, Jared said. Like it was drugged. They began to dream, horrible, vivid dreams that felt real. And the sleeping. We had to sleep in shifts. Very specific. They tracked who was awake and who wasn't. Some of the students began to push back. They wanted to leave. But they were terrified. A few tried to escape. Jared swallowed hard. I heard them screaming. As they were dragged into the woods. They were never seen again. Drop of blood. The sacrifice. They told us the world had ended. Outside those woods, there was nothing left. We were chosen to start over. But it wasn't a sanctuary. It was a prison. A cult. And those who refused to accept it. They were sacrificed, Jared whispered. I saw it. I saw them taken, offered to the forest. They never came back. Man running the escape. By 2006, I couldn't take it anymore, he said. I ran. I didn't stop. I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe they'd forget me. I built a new life. I never told anyone. Then came the news. The bus had been found. I knew, he said. I knew they hadn't forgotten. That's why I came back. To tell the truth. Because I'm not the only one. The room fell deathly silent. No one spoke. No one could. Jared's confession wasn't just an explanation. It was a warning. The nightmare wasn't over. It was waiting. It was more than a disappearance. It was a conspiracy. A cult. And it had taken 27 young lives. Reconditioned. Controlled. Sacrificed. Jared had escaped. But the others, they were never meant to. They had been chosen, for something ancient. Something dark. And the forest, the very place that buried their bones, had also buried the truth. Because the world they'd been told was gone. It was still out there. Waiting. Waiting for the next generation. Puzzle piece. The town divided. When Jared came forward, the reaction was instant, and divided. Some families clung to his every word. They needed answers. Any answers. And Jared gave them something to hold on to. But others rejected him outright. They couldn't accept that their children, their sons and daughters, had met such a fate. To them, Jared wasn't a witness. He was the villain. The town split. Some called him a hero. Others branded him a madman. The media fed off the chaos. And Jared? He stayed quiet. Because he knew the truth. And the truth was worse than anyone could imagine. Shield protective custody and the memoir. The police placed Jared under protection. Too many questions. Too many threats. Too many people who wanted him silenced. Eventually, Jared wrote it all down. Everything. The memoir was raw. Disturbing. And it became an instant sensation. It ignited a firestorm of theories. Was the class of '99 part of a government experiment? Was the militia involved? What really happened in those woods? Some believed every word. Others dismissed it as trauma twisted into fantasy. But everyone agreed on one thing. Jared had seen something. Something that changed him. Something inhuman. Candle the final pilgrimage. Months passed. The public moved on. But Jared never did. One overcast afternoon, he returned. To Forest Grove High School. The place where it all began. Where the laughter of the class of '99 once echoed. Where summer once meant freedom. Now, it stood quiet. A memorial. Polished stone. A plaque engraved with 27 names. He knelt before it, slowly pulling a worn, mold-stained yearbook from his coat. He opened it carefully. Tucked into the back was a note. Handwritten. Faded. We tried to leave. Only I made it. I'm sorry. He slid it into the yearbook. Buried it deep. For someone else to find. Then, without a word, Jared rose and walked away. Leaving behind the names. The guilt. And the truth. Whole the legend grows. Some say Jared made it all up. A broken mind weaving stories to make sense of trauma. Others say he didn't even scratch the surface. That what happened in those woods was far worse than he ever described. But one thing is certain. The class of '99 still haunts the trees of Oregon. The forest remembers.